What's up, everyone, and welcome to Movie Emporium's Flashback Reviews, where I take movies from the past, break them down, and tell you what I think about them. If you like what you see, of course, hit the subscribe button, join Movie Emporium, hit that notification bell at the top to find what's coming next, and comment below on any videos you watch on my channel. So, I know I'm doing the Back to the Future film trilogy out of order. It's just the way it works with the anniversary thing. Back to the Future Part 3 is the first film of this year to come out with the anniversary part. Back to the Future, the original, came out 35 years ago this year, but that's not until July 2nd, so I'll talk about it when that comes around. But Back to the Future Part 3 is the last film in the trilogy. It is the culmination of this entire universe that involves Marty McFly and Doc Brown and, all these characters that have been kind of revolving around this franchise since 1985. And to me personally, I know a lot of people won't agree with me. This is the second best film in this trilogy. It's a lot of fun. It has a lot of heart, and it brings in Mary Steenburgen as probably one of my favorite characters in the franchise because she's sweet, she's good-hearted, she's good-natured, but she has a good side to her that really reflects off of Doc Brown, who has basically been short-shrift or short-shafted this whole entire franchise with basically rescuing Marty, so he's never had anything good to happen to him. And it's nice to see Doc Brown get some kind of conclusion, some kind of closure to this franchise and something good to happen in his life with the character, of course, of Claire. And Back to the Future Part 3 was shot back to back with Back to the Future Part 2. It was a film that basically was almost like a palate cleanser or relief cleanser for Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale. It's really well known that Robert Zemeckis basically ran himself ragged trying to edit Back to the Future Part 2 as he was filming Back to the Future Part 3. I give him a lot of credit because, after doing something that's as dark and kind of depressing as Back to the Future Part 2, it's kind of nice to see them go back to the whimsical, the fun nature of what Back to the Future is, which is a fun time traveling romp of an adventure. And they did the one thing that they kind of wanted to do. They wanted to do a Western. The cinematographer of this movie talked about, how him and the cast were very involved with the fact that they wanted to do a Western. Is it a true Western? No, because there's time travel involved and stuff like that. But it really has the feel and nature of what a Western can be, which is horse riding, guns and battles, and the bad guys versus the good guys, the old West setting, the dust, the dirt, the nastiness, the bars, the alcohol, all that good stuff, the parties. And I love this film. I really do. I think it's a fun, energetic film. It's crazy this movie made no money. It made like $86 million, which is a complete insane 180 to what the original Back to the Future did. And it's because, I hate to say it, Back to the Future Part 2 was so divisive in its depressing nature of what it was going for that it really hampered the fact of what Back to the Future Part 3 was trying to do, which is, create a good old-fashioned Western film. And the other problem that runs in these two films is the fact that these movies were shot 5 years later, or 4 or 5 years later. They were shot back to back in 88, 89. It really, really shows with the age of how, Michael J. Fox looks and, of course, Christopher Lloyd looks. It's really weird in this movie to see Leia Thompson and James Tolkan and Thomas F. Wilson playing completely different characters. I'm not saying it's bad. I find it a little off-putting because Biff Tannen, who is the main antagonist through the first two movies, his great-grandfather Buford Tannen is the main antagonist here, and he looks exactly like Biff Tannen. Not saying those traits carry over or anything of that nature, but it's just really kind of a strange thing to see because Leia Thompson is playing the wife of Seamus McFly, and Seamus McFly is the great-grandfather of Marty McFly. And of course, Michael J. Fox is playing Seamus McFly, which is not necessarily a bad thing because we've had actors do, different big, other characters in the same movie. But Leia Thompson's character looks exactly like her character Lorraine, so it doesn't really work, and that's my biggest qualm in this movie. And of course, you have James Tolkan playing the grandfather of his character in the original movie, as well as the sequel. So you're starting to see some kind of weird things, weird plays. I don't know what Bob Gale and Robert Zemeckis were doing in that instance. Like I said, Thomas F. Wilson's bad guys are completely different in this one. You know, if they really wanted to go complete, they should have just brought back the same bad guys for Thomas F. Wilson's Buford, Biff character. But they didn't, so I mean, it is what it is. But this movie is basically takes place literally right after Back to the Future Part 2. It's kind of interesting to see that Back to the Future 1, 2, and 3 take place within like a couple of weeks of one another, with the present time taking place like within a day or two. So you're seeing like the kind of transformation of Marty from being this like cool kind of weird kid to being this time traveler expertise type character. And it's really interesting to see, because this takes place right after Back to the Future Part 2, to kind of see what happened after the original Back to the Future. We see Doc Brown kind of going through the motions and steps of what he is comprehending and what exactly happened. The problem is, because Marty McFly and everything that's happened to him is completely changed everything. So therefore he is basically involved with a situation where he has to convince Doc Brown once again that he is legit the real Marty McFly. And it leads into some funny stuff, with it's very close and very similar to Back to the Future, where Doc Brown is freaking out and he's going into the bathroom once again, and Marty McFly has to explain to him about the letter and about where the DeLorean is hidden into this cave. So they go to the cave, they retrieve the DeLorean. It's a lot of fun, where we find out that, of course, Doc Brown in the 1885 scenario has been shot and killed by Buford Tannen. He was beloved by Claire, and they devise a plan to, even though, Emmett Brown says, "Don't go back and rescue me," to go back and rescue Emmett Brown in 1885. I find that kind of fascinating, that scenario, because it gives you a chance to see kind of an Old West scenario. It gives you a chance to see the nature of what Doc Brown has been going through in 8 or 9 months, because he gets shot back in like January or December of 1884. And so when Marty goes back, everything is completely, there's nothing there. They end up in this like drive-in movie theater where it's far enough away that he's not going to crash into any trees or anything like that. He's not going to crash into any building structures. But the funny part is because of where he's going, he gets involved with like some Indian characters and some Cavalier characters, and there's a bear, and because he's being chased by the Indian folk, he gets his gas tank shot by an arrow. So they have to, when he eventually meets Doc Brown, they have to devise a way to get the DeLorean back into capacity, which leads into the train sequence, which is a lot of fun. But this is where we're introduced to Seamus and his wife, and they have a kid. And there is a really funny moment where it's a really bad optical effect that I really kind of thought was funny. You can tell special effects were just not up to snuff in this time. You can tell that the optical effects and what they were trying to do is very limited and very kind of simplified in the situation. We have a situation where Seamus, Michael J. Fox, Marty McFly, Michael J. Fox are talking to one another, and Seamus is holding the baby, and he has to pass it off to Marty McFly. Well, as he's passing it off to Marty McFly, basically Lorraine, or the Leia Thompson character, walks across in a very bad superimposed image of her walking across the frame, which does the transition effect. And today, you've seen it with like Lord of the Rings and stuff like that, the stuff can be done really easy digitally now. It can be really done really smooth, and really, you don't have to have people walking across the screen for this stuff to work. And it's just really, really funny to see that kind of stuff happen, especially in a movie like this, because it deals with a lot of special effects and visual effects. And it was like in Back to the Future, where when the flames shoot across Marty and Emmett, Doc Brown, you can see like the optical effects and stuff like that, the painting over the fact that it was a visual effect and it wasn't really done that well. So once Marty is kind of set loose to go to Hill Valley, we get our opening sequence of Hill Valley in the 1800s. It's a very simplified town. The clock tower is basically like a construction piece right now, so you can see all the boarding and all the scaffolding and stuff like that. The clock tower itself, the clock hasn't even been put up. There's gonna be a big like party, a big celebration for the eventual induction of the clock. But this is where we get the introduction to Buford Tannen. This is where we get the reintroduction to Doc Brown of the 1985 version. This is where we get Harry Carey Jr., Pat Buttram, and Dub Taylor, who are really well-known Western stars / voice actors. They're the ones you always see in the saloon, always making jokes and wisecracks and stuff like that. One of the characters is actually, his voice is so recognizable as like a cartoon actor, stuff like that. So it's a really cool homage and really cool nod to the Westerns and the cartoons of the late 50s and 60s and so on and so forth. So it's really cool to see their characters just kind of joke and toss wisecracks. You know, they're making fun of, like, of course, Marty McFly's shoes and his costume and stuff like that, how he interacts and stuff like that. You know, later on when Doc Brown is going into the saloon to kind of commiserate the fact that he lost Claire, they're making fun of his predictions of the future and stuff like that. So it's really fun to see these three characters in this. And like I said, Buford almost hangs Marty McFly, which is really dark. We get our final introduction to Marty and Doc finally meeting together after so long. And we start to get our developing story of how we're going to get back into the future. And it involves using a train. And that becomes a big plot point. How are they going to use this train? And then we get the idea of, they have this ravine that is called the Shonash Ravine. It's going to be called the Claire Ravine because, you know, Claire, you know, Mary Steenburgen character eventually dies over the ravine, but, you know, Doc Brown saves her. But it basically, they use these bricks to basically power the locomotive to shoot forward to 88 miles an hour, eventually saving Marty and all that good stuff. And that's where we save, of course, Claire's character. We introduce to Mary Steenburgen, and we get the love connection, the love introduction between Doc Brown and Claire, which kind of runs into the TV animated series that eventually comes out. And that is what this story from here on out does so well, is you give us great characters, you give us great villains, you give us great settings, and you do it in a very positive way. You know, there is a very dark undertone with the fact of, you know, Buford Tannen with the whole horse throwing his shoe, which is the shoe that they put on the feet of the horse. The fact that they have till Monday morning, which is when Doc was originally going to die, but now Marty's going to die because he's been called yellow, and so he stands up to Buford, and there's a whole, you know, showdown, stuff like that. We start to, like I said, the developing romance that eventually comes into like a blossoming love story of Doc Brown and Mary Steenburgen's Claire character, and it leads all up into this conclusion where Doc Brown has finally come to the full realization that he can't stay here. He can't stay in this time because he has basically told Marty for the longest time, for 2 films, that you start messing with history, history will come back and bite you in the ass, which is exactly what happens in Back to the Future Part 2. And Marty has to make him understand, has to like force this like ideology back into him, which forces the sad realization that Doc Brown can't be with Claire. So he reveals the whole idea of what he's there for. And of course, she's not going to believe him because time travel is a farce. It's not real. It's not realistic. In this universe, it is real. But I mean, you think about it. You have a woman who is very into science, like Doc Brown is, loves Jules Verne, loves all these natures of the idea of science. But time travel is so out there and ridiculous, and the implications of what time travel can do, that it just doesn't make any sense. So of course she gets pissed off at him and she kind of dumps him, and he goes and has like one of the greatest moments of the franchise where he is sitting there commiserating, like I said, and Marty goes to save him to get him to the train so Marty isn't having to confront Buford. Basically, Doc Brown takes the drink that he's been holding, the whiskey drink, and he drinks it, and he basically passes out from drunkenness. And it's really funny because it's so unexpected, and they tried to warn him, what happened in July and stuff like that. They concoct this drink to basically wake up and sober out Doc Brown, which turns into like a really chaotic, goofy moment where he ends up running himself into a trough. There's like a 10-minute situation where they're gonna have to wait for him to completely clear himself. And it leads into a confrontation between Mad Dog Buford Tannen, which he doesn't like to be called Mad Dog, and Marty McFly. And that's a really funny funny sequence, because the only protection that Marty has on him that we don't see until like the very end is he puts on a piece of the stove plate onto his chest. And he eventually wins by, because Buford shoots him in the chest, saves his life. And Marty basically punches him out, punches the hell out of Buford Tannen. Buford falls into the manure. And that's the end of Buford. They have the running joke throughout the entire trilogy of the, manure and the whole Tannen family. And it leads into basically probably the best sequence in the entire trilogy, to be honest. I love the ending to Back to the Future Part 1, but this sequence and the way it was planned out, the way it was shot, the tense nature of it, the fact that we're getting Claire involved in the situation where the two are pretty much perfectly set to get out of the situation. Doc and Marty, Doc's almost to the car. They're going to escape. But Claire throws a wrench into the mix where she basically is in the conductor car area and she's blowing the horn, and Doc realizes he has to save her because she's going to fall over the ravine, dies, massive explosion, blah, blah, blah. And so he goes back and she tells her he loves her, and he saves her with the help of the hoverboard, and he goes off to be with Claire. But it leads him back into 1885. Marty ends up going back to 1985. The train locomotive explodes, completely, destroys itself. And it leads to the conclusion where Marty has to confront his fear of, being called yellow, being called scaredy cat, stuff like that. He is confronted by needles again. He's with, Jennifer. And he confronts the situation that has been leaning on him this whole entire trilogy, where when we see him in part 2, we see him in a state of disarray. He's basically at the end of his rope, and the reason for that is he crashed into this really nice, really rich person's car, and it caused him to be sued. It caused his whole family life to collapse. And instead of actually doing what he would always do, he actually backs away from the situation, and it saves his life. It saves everything. Everything that has been leading up since part 2 is completely erased. Everything that going forward is what his choosing, and he makes a decision, the ultimate choice, to change his life for the better. So there you go. Now, I could leave it at that. The two go back to the whole, the DeLorean has been exploded or been, completely destroyed by another train in 1985. It's the end of the DeLorean. I could be completely happy if the film ended there. If Doc Brown, there's a picture that was sent to Marty, kind of like the envelope with the letter, and just explaining to Marty, about how happy he is. He had 2 kids. He had a great life with Claire. Everything went well for him. But they do the one sin, the one thing that basically throws us over the shark, and that is the creation of the train time machine. Okay, it's a great ending because Marty and Doc get their one last moment. We see Claire with Jules and Vern, the 2 kids. We see, of course, Marty and Jennifer. And I love the sequence when I was a kid. Everybody did, but it doesn't make any sense. How the hell did Doc Brown create a time machine in 1885? It's hard enough to believe that he created a time machine in 1955, but 1885, where is he getting these parts from? Did he literally for like 40 years create a time machine? I mean, he's already like 40 or 50 years old as it is. Where the hell did he get these parts from? Where, they had a hard enough time finding gas, for God's sakes. Where is he getting time machine parts? So it's a complete plot hole problem that you kind of have to overlook if you just want to go with the trilogy. The movie is great enough as it is that I almost kind of have to overlook it, but it's just such a weird moment, such a weird kind of strange dichotomy of a movie that has had great Western theme, but it also is used in the animated series, which was just came out later on after this. So I guess I kind of forgive it. It's actually at Universal Studios, I think, in Orlando. So I mean, what it is, but it's just such a weird thing. I don't understand the point of it. It like has the ability to fly, it has smokestacks. That's another thing. How's it able to fly? There are magnets and stuff like that, but it's just like there was no real like logic put into that situation, so I have to kind of deduct it just for that. But with that said, Back to the Future Part 3 is a great conclusion to the trilogy. It definitely made up for Part 2, which I know a lot of people like. I don't personally think it's the greatest of films, but it introduced some interesting subjects and interesting ideas that kind of presented even today's technology. But the Western motifs, the fact that it feels like this is a more cohesive whole, it feels like it's a more relaxed whole, it feels like people are having more fun, is what made this movie more exciting to me than even part two. And I just love everybody in this film. I love, the idea of going back in time and seeing a realistic setting, even though it's a time travel movie. I love what Doc Brown and Marty McFly are doing here. I love what Mary Steenburgen is doing here, the innocence in her eyes, the good-natured heart to her character. And it's just a fun movie. It really is. It's something you spend an hour and 50 minutes watching. You have a good time. It has great action set pieces. It has great moments. And it's just a good film all around. And I really enjoyed it. It's such a shame that it didn't do very well, but like I said, that adverse effect of part two really affected it. But Back to the Future, and I'll talk about this a little bit when I talk about Back to the Future, it's a trilogy of a very fascinating group of individuals. Doc Brown and Marty McFly, which were kind of inspirations for Rick and Morty, are two characters that have some of the greatest chemistry in film history, even modern history. There are two characters that are such odd pairings that they just work off one another. Yeah, the two parts, the 2 and 3, which were shot back to back, are making them look older, so it doesn't really fit as well. But I think when you look at characters and you look at ways or people are put together and kind of, placed into a script, I think what Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale did here with these characters and the settings and the pieces and stuff like that, you can't beat it with Marty McFly and Doc Emmett Brown. It's just two characters that have such great momentum that when the characters eventually have their conclusion, you really feel like you've been on a journey with them. And that's what you want out of films like this. That's what you want out of situations and stories and stuff like that. So yeah, Back to the Future Part 3, it's a movie that, like I said, has a weird ending, but it really does hit on all cylinders and really makes it feel like a great conclusion to a trilogy. So there you go. That's Back to the Future Part 3, the end of the Back to the Future trilogy. Like I said, I'll get to Back to the Future in July. I promise, when this trilogy out with a bang with one of my favorite comedies of all time. So that'll do it. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments below what you think of this movie. Do you like it? Do you not like it? What's your favorite or least favorite part of it? Also hit the like or dislike button, based on what you think of this video, as well as any other video on this channel. Hit the subscribe button to join Movie Emporium. Notification bell at the top to find out what's coming next, and comment below on any video that you watch, including this one. Otherwise, we'll see you guys on the next video. Peace out. What's up, guys? Thank you so much for checking out Movie Emporium. I really appreciate it. If you want to, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Hit the notification button and the bell at the top. Find out what's coming next for Movie Emporium. Also, check out these two videos. They're amazing. I think they're awesome. I think you'll enjoy them too. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching, guys. We'll see you next time.